Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm in Melee Kirby, and today we are taking it back to chapter 17, 18, 19, 20, and 20X Sacae route of Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade. So, I haven't actually edited and uploaded it yet, but I will be putting out the SSS episode for the Ilya characters before this episode goes up. So if you've listened to that, you would know that I bragged about the new kind of setup I have going on and that there should be less wobbling. And then listening back to that audio, it turns out that it wobbles and makes a bunch of noise even more because it turns out that this table is so unstable that if I even just tap it a little bit, I can't win. I'm sorry, guys. There's just gonna be some of that sometimes, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, Sacae today. That's exciting. I am definitely glad to not be in Sacae anymore. There is also background noise from cars. I'm just kind of all over the place today. Before we get into talking about the Sacae maps, however, we are going to spend a little time looking at the results of the last question that I asked, which was, who is your favorite youngest Pegasus sister? And I got some good replies over on Twitter, so let's take a look at those. At King MetaCurbD posted a GIF of just the word Vanessa with some hearts and smiley faces and the words "love you," which are off-center from the GIF, and you'll see what I'm talking about if you go and look at it. It's kind of a shit GIF actually, and I think that King MetaCurbD could probably do better than that. But I have to give him some credit because it is probably the only Vanessa-related GIF that he could find. So we'll cut him some slack on that one. And then at Biozilla said Est because I was impressed by the performance of her voice actor in Echoes. And then he does a little aside where he says, "No way, Echoes has great voice acting." The understated friction between her and Paula over Abel also lends a bit of depth that is lacking in many other Arcanean characters. Fully agree with all of that. You're right. Echoes having good voice acting is quite possibly the coldest Fire Emblem take of all time, but it's correct. Echoes has fucking phenomenal voice acting, and S voice actress does a phenomenal job. I agree with that completely. I do think that her dynamic with Paula and Katria is fleshed out pretty well. And it's a little hard to say, right? Because on the one hand, they are in so many games. They are in, if you count remakes and stuff, they are in 6, I think, maybe more, which is obviously an insane number of games for these guys to be in. But also, to be fair to that caveat, they only really get characterization in one of them. 1, 2, 3, and then 11 and 12 don't really flesh out their characters much at all. I mean, 12 has some supports, and obviously 11 has a little story dialogue, and they all kind of get a couple lines here and there. But for the most part, Echoes does 90% of the legwork on making them into fully fleshed out, realized characters. So I don't think it's that much of an advantage to say that they're in that many games when most of them are some of the least written games in the entire series. So I think that their trio of sisters is great. Est is definitely my favorite as well, although I am quite a big fan of Shanna now that I've kind of replayed and paid more attention to her supports. I think that she is a great character, but Est is best as always. I love Est. I love her in the gameplay. Also, I usually pick Est if I'm ever doing a draft of any of the Arcanea games, or fucking Echoes. There we go. But I also really like her as a character as well. So thank you for the two of you for answering. And yeah, so next time, what I want to know from you guys is, what is your favorite route in this game between Ilya and Sacae? I have a feeling I have a pretty good idea of what the answers are going to be on this one, but I do know some people who like Sacae. partially because it's so hard and they kind of like the extra challenge. So maybe I'll get a couple of Sacae answers after all, but I'm expecting kind of a little bit of an Ilya sweep here, but who knows? Could be wrong. So go ahead and tweet your answers at I'mAMeleeKirby or email me at turnwillpodcast@gmail.com and let me know what you prefer between Ilya route and Sacae route in FE6. Now, I did mention in one of the more recent episodes, I said that I don't check the email very often because I never get emails from anyone, basically. But I did actually check it after recording that episode. Just, it had been a little while since I checked it. And I did actually get an email from somebody, and I'm not gonna say their name, but you know who you are. If you've emailed my email, then you are the only one, which is great. And I definitely like to see that. So hopefully, maybe if I check more often, I'll check right now and see if there's been any others. Nope. Well, that's fine though. Yeah. Thank you for writing in, and I'm excited to see if anyone else does that as well in the future. All right. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our first chapter, which is called "The Bishop's Teachings." I don't know why it's called that, actually. I don't remember. Maybe that's a bad sign. Maybe I need to go read the script again. So, as you would expect, these are the same chapters that we played last time. They're just in a different route, different setting, and the maps themselves are different, but because it needs to cover the same ground narratively, a lot of the plot beats are the same. So that is to say, Roy decides that he's going to take the offensive against Byrne. He merges his army with the Etrurian army, and this time they are headed out to Sacae rather than Ilya. There's no real, there's not really a justification as to why one area over the other. There's no in-universe reason why they would go, one way or versus the other way. The mechanical piece of it is that your Ilian characters are more trained, so I guess you could argue that maybe they're a little bit more active in the army, maybe have a little bit more sway over Roy's opinions, but that's a stretch at best. So I think it's best to kind of just, it's not, I don't care that much. It doesn't really matter to me one way or the other if the narrative justification is there. I just think it's interesting to kind of evaluate different possible scenarios and why you would get sent to one over the other. Like we've been doing with the Gaiden maps, right? Does it make sense for this Gaiden to be cut off from you if you don't fulfill the requirements? And for some of them, the answer is yes, like in 8x and 12x. 14x, you could argue, and then, but some of them, 16x and 20x Ilya, don't make any fucking sense, because why do both Juno and Zealot need to be alive? Why can't it just be one of them? Things like that. So I kind of like to think about this stuff, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense here as to why, based on the experience of your characters, they would go to a different place, but they just wanted to add some replay value, I guess. Now, unfortunately, they don't actually explain that to you at all. They never, there's never a point where they're like, hey, Roy, maybe, if you had trained your nomads, you could have gone to Sacae next time. So maybe there should have been a cutscene where Thea and Shanna show up and are like, hey, let's do this. And Roy's like, okay. And then, yeah, whatever. It would have helped maybe think, okay, well, what if there's another place I could have gone if I had trained other characters? I don't know. It's a stretch, obviously, but I think it's worth considering at least. Now, I'm pretty sure this happened last time as well, but I didn't really make a note of it, and I wanted to this time because I think it's interesting. So, Roy understands that even though, his army is from Lycia, he's the leader of the army, and he is from Lycia, the Lycian army, the Lycian League army or whatever, does not command as much respect as it could have been, or as it could do. So, in order to kind of bolster their, I guess, reputation is maybe the wrong word. Oh god, what's that? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Reputability as an army. In order to come across as a more reputable army, Roy decides that he is going to shelve his pride and just kind of lump them all together under the Etrurian army, which is a shame. I mean, it doesn't matter, obviously, like, I don't care, but I just think, like, Roy, I mean, he's the leader, and he worked hard to get here. He saved Etruria's ass multiple times, so it's just kind of a bummer that because they're kind of the bigger, more influential country, they get to, have their name on the trophy at the end, I guess, so to speak. But I think it's a good piece of characterization for Roy that he'd be fine with this and that he doesn't really care. I mean, I think that's very in line with his personality. He's much more interested in getting results than in any kind of pomp and circumstance. Like he doesn't really seem like the type to put up a fight about this. So it was probably recommended to him by somebody, and he said, "Okay, sure, why not?" All right, so we enter Sacae. We get an enemy POV of Brunya. I don't think we actually saw Brunya last time, but I might be wrong about that. Brunya is, I think we've met her before, like in the early game, but she is one of the 3 Wyvern generals, along with, Narshin is dead now, but him and Murdoch, who are the other 2. Brunya is here, and she is kind of in charge of the defense of Sacae, essentially. And she is talking with Accardo and Roritz, and she says, "Roritz, you're going to do this. Accardo, you're going to do this." Kind of similarly to how they were delegated tasks and roles in Ilya. So, which makes me think maybe she was there, but I just don't remember it. We also find out here that the Jute clan, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is working with Byrne, and yeah, I don't remember exactly what she says, but it's just to establish that there are some Sacaeans working with Byrne, and that you're going to be fighting some Sacaeans in this route compared to Ilya route, where you fought some Ilian Pegasus Knights, but there were very few, and almost none of the, like, it was barely ever brought up in the story. They were kind of just like grunt soldiers, so worth noting. This is a Fog of War map, and it's fine. It's fine. It is the singular map of all time, and I'm gonna be real. I don't really have much to say about most of the maps in this route, and I felt the same way in the previous route as well. With the alien maps, and it occurred to me that these maps were like I felt like maybe I was off my game, or like I was missing something, or just out of practice, whatever. But I think it's because the potential of these maps is so wasted, and I don't necessarily mean that in like a like if they were used to their full potential, they would be good, because they're not. A lot of these maps are dog shit. But what I do mean is that these are clearly set up to be difficult maps. Like, this is kind of, I don't know if this was intentionally designed this way, but this is by far meant to be, or this is by far in practice the much harder of the 2 routes. So you could see it as kind of hard mode. And a lot of the maps are built around gimmicks or reinforcements or some kind of element to the map that is going to make it difficult for you. In this case, it's the Fog of War and some Ballista, but it might be something else, later. In this map, it is the Fog of War and the Ballista, kind of, and then other maps, later maps in the Sacae route have this much more clearly. But I think you could very easily argue that is what the intention is. But they're so goddamn easy, and I think this is kind of a good place to talk about this game in terms of normal mode versus hard mode, because I underestimated myself, I guess. I thought this was going to be pretty hard because I'm not save stating, I'm not warp skipping, and I remember FE6 being a decently challenging game, and it is a decently challenging game in a few places. I think Chapter 7 is still pretty difficult on normal mode. I think Chapter 11A is pretty tricky on normal mode. Some of the guided maps are at least comparably obnoxious on normal mode, if not necessarily difficult per se. So part of me was like, I don't really have a whole lot to say about these. Maybe I should have played on hard mode. Maybe that's something I should consider doing for the future games, maybe playing like harder difficulties and stuff. And I might still, but just for fun, I played a few chapters of FE6 hard mode, and it is maybe the least fun I've had playing a Fire Emblem game in my fucking life. It is so annoying, and it's hard. I do feel challenged, but it's not in a fun way. I don't feel like I'm being tasked with like interesting strategy. I feel like the enemies are just pure stat blocks that are bulky and fast and do a lot of damage. If I overextend even a little bit, then I'm not is it doesn't work. I just get bodied immediately. I have been trying to stick to. I mean, I think I've given up at this point. Basically, I made it to like chapter 5, I think, and it's like this is not fun. I don't care about this enough to continue. But I had been trying to keep my standard of the safe state of no safe stating in case I ever wanted to talk about it on the podcast. But I don't think anyone play tested it. Frankly, I think that no one could have possibly played FE6 hard mode and been like, "Yep, no, this is fine. Yeah, we can do this." It's like laughably difficult, and it's not impossible to beat. And there have been plenty of people who have done it without save stating or without warp skipping. Like there are ways to do it, but it's just not worth it to me. I don't think it's a very fun piece of game design. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, right? Because on the one hand, it's really hard if you play hard mode. Okay, fair enough. But normal mode is so easy that I feel like I barely have anything to talk about with these maps because I'm not engaging with the mechanics in the way that I think I'm intended to. I'm trying my best, but like I don't. I feel like there's something missing. There's some kind of X factor here, in normal mode that I'm not really getting the full experience of, and I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna continue playing normal mode. I think that's for the best. But if you ever feel like maybe I'm not talking as much about these maps as you would like, or I mean, even in the future games in the series just get easier from here, basically, more or less. Um, and I mean, part of it is maybe I just don't have a lot to say about this game. This is definitely a game that I have I'm pretty neutral on. I think I was pretty neutral on it going in, and I still am. I don't think I have very strong opinions about this game, which I think part of the reason that that feels weird is because Fire Emblem 4 is one of my favorite games in the series. Fire Emblem 5 is one of my least favorite games in the series. So I feel very passionately about both of those games. And I do like FE6. I love Fire Emblem. I love talking about Fire Emblem and playing Fire Emblem. But I think just the content in FE6 I'm just less enthusiastic about. So I think that's part of where this is coming from too. This isn't meant to be like any kind of like self-criticism or anything like, oh, can you guys help me or bear with me or whatever. I'm not asking for any of that. I think it's worth reflecting on because I think that it's interesting, and it's the first time I've run into this problem, and I think it's going to be useful to keep in mind going forward because I have a lot of games left to talk about, and I'm not super passionate about all of them as I am with FE4 and 5. I am passionate about these games mostly, just like more broadly. I'm having fun talking about them, having fun playing them. So I don't think I'll ever run out of stuff to say, but I don't know. That was a little bit of a rant there for a while. So I'll just stop here and say, yeah, if you feel like I have kind of not been talking about the maps as much or as thoroughly, that's maybe a little bit of the reason why. Okay, so for chapter 18, there's really not much to say. There's a couple different ways to go, which is pretty good. I did feel like I was encouraged to split up my army, which was nice. There was some ballista in the north that I was able to take out, some wyverns, things like that. There is a village in the south that has something called the Tina staff, which is not notable by itself, but this is actually something I haven't talked about yet, and maybe I'll have Soup talk about this next time I have him on, because I think that he's probably a little bit more knowledgeable about this than I am. But I wanted to mention it here since I think this is the last time it's going to be relevant. The Tina staff is an item that is meant to be sort of a companion or like a part of a set with Gant's lance and Al's sword, which are items that you get a couple different points in the game that are quite good. I mean, Al's sword is pretty good. It's like slightly stronger than an iron sword and like a little bit more accurate, but it's not quite as good as a steel sword. It's it's kind of like a decent. It's like an iron sword plus, basically. You can kind of think about it that way. So it's useful if you need accurate hits, but the iron sword isn't quite enough to get you there. I think the Gant's lance is a little bit heavier and a little bit less accurate than the iron sword, but it's better than the steel sword, or the steel lance rather. So the reason I bring this up is because, first of all, it's just kind of weird, right? I mean, they never do this sort of thing again unless you count, I guess, the stuff from Awakening that you can get, but those are in reference to other characters in the series, so it's not really the same thing. We have no idea who Al or Gant or Tina are. They never come up in any of the story or anything like that. So who are they? Well, apparently they are characters in the FE6 manga, and that's basically all I know about them. Apparently Al is like half dragon or something, and people joke that he's going to be the protagonist of he's going to be the Avatar protagonist of the remake, which is pretty funny. Which, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past Intelligent Systems at this point, but you know. So I wanted to bring that up because I think that's just an interesting little piece of trivia. I know that when I first got those items, I was very confused, and I was like, what the fuck are these? Who do these belong to? And it never comes up in game, but maybe if I have Soup back on at some point, we can talk a little bit about the manga. I should read the manga. That could be fun. That's basically all there is to Chapter 17. I might have said Chapter 18 earlier, but I meant 17. You get to the end, you kill Ricardo, just like in 17 Ilya. It's all good, it's fine, everything turns out okay. And you're ready to move into Sacae proper, because as with Ilya, this was kind of a fight on the border to kind of stop you from getting in. Interspersed throughout all the chapters are just the same Guinevere Roy scenes about, talking about how Zephiel died and how Desmond died and Zephiel's role in all of it. So I'm not going to mention any of those again. I talked about them last main episode. But just keep that in mind as we're going through these. I'm not skipping over the story. It's just stuff we've already talked about. All right. So the next chapter is chapter 19, chapter 18, which is called the Law of Sacae. This is the first chapter with the Jute clan as an antagonist. You have entered into Sacae, and they are keeping you away from, they're trying to prevent you from going any further into Sacae. We find out that there is a character named Dayan who is trying to form something of a resistance to kind of fight back against the Jute clan and Burn. We get a little insight on the culture of Sacae. Sacae is formed of a bunch of nomadic tribes. If you couldn't gather from characters like Sue and Shin, they're very they're nomadic tribes, very inspired by like Northern Asia cultures, like historically, and that's pretty cool. I really like them aesthetically. I think they're neat. We find out that the Jute clan is having a hard time stopping Dayan. And part of the reason for that is that the other clans will not get involved. Dayan is from the Kutala clan, and the other clans will not get involved because they see it as a dispute between two different clans, and they're not going to get involved with that. Now, there is a kind of caveat to that, which is that if some outside force is to invade Burn, and one clan is fighting against them, it is kind of the traditional law of Sacae that all of the clans get together and fight you, the invaders, which in this case is you. And that's kind of like the in-universe explanation for why, the Jute clan outnumbers you so completely, and yet they're having a hard time putting down Dayan, who is not doing too hot, in terms of the resistance. So, there's just a little bit of an interesting insight into their culture. So the point of this map is to get to the seize point, which is in the center, and you'll see that the center tent is, the seize point, but it's surrounded by, I want to say, like 12 or 16 little tents. Now, the goal of this map is to make it to the center where the seize point is. You'll see that the center tent, which is the seize point, is kind of surrounded by 10 or 12 smaller tents. As you get close, ambush spawns, same turn reinforcements, will pop out of those tents and try to kill you, which is the main gimmick of this map. Other than that, the nomads, I guess, are here, and the nomads are really, really fucking strong and have really high stats. On normal mode, they're more than killable. They have good stats, but they're certainly not anything special. But on hard mode, these guys are like borderline unkillable. They're very, 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 very strong. And then you fight your way through all the fucking nomads, and then you get to the center, and then, well, you need to drop Roy at some point so that he can seize, but then he gets jumped by like 6 guys and dies, and this map is no fun. On hard mode, it seems completely miserable, but on normal mode, it's like doable. It's just kind of annoying. My Roy is still very underleveled. He's actually not that bad. He's in like level 12, I think, or something like that, which is not good, and his stats are terrible, but like he's not completely untrained like he is in a lot of my runs. So he's still getting his shit pushed in by mostly like any promoted enemy pretty much just kills him. So, but if you can time it right and make sure that you block some of the reinforcements, maybe get a little lucky, you can capture the throne, or the gate, or the tent, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And that's the end of this chapter. Really, again, really obnoxious on hard mode. On normal mode, it's fine. It's alright. It's not the worst thing in the world. Next up, we have chapter 19, which is called The Battle of Bulgar. Roy and company have pushed their way deep enough into Sacae to have reached Bulgar, which is, I think, the capital, or at least like a big city in Sacae, like one of the biggest cities in Sacae. And Roritz is here. He was ordered to guard Sacae, or ordered to guard Bulgar. But as soon as the Etrurian army is in sight, he just says fuck it and runs away. And he runs off to somewhere else. We're going to have to deal with him later. We don't fight him until chapter 20. In his place, he leaves a swordmaster named Kel, who, we'll talk about him, don't you worry. Now, most of the specifics of this chapter are well, I guess the specifics of this chapter are different as they have been up to this point, but the broad strokes are the same. Guinevere and Roy are still talking about Zephiel, and it's all the same. We're just liberating the country, things like that, yada yada. One of the only more significant changes here, I guess, is the introduction of Nime's character. In Ilia Route, Nime was introduced as working for Dane, or sorry, not Dane, working for Byrne, and kind of helping them. Obviously, she tried to give them warnings about like using her spells and things like that. But she was trying to learn more about the dragons on their side. In this route, it seems like she's with the resistance force that is fighting to liberate Sacae for some reason. I don't actually remember why. I have the script pulled up. For some reason, most of the other wikis, like the main wiki and then the other one, or the fandom wiki and then the good one, I should say, neither of those have the scripts for these couple of chapters, but the Serenus Forest script is still there, so it's fine. Anyway, getting off topic, Nime's here with the resistance fighters, and I'll be sure to double check why she is doing this, but just if you see her, you'll be like, oh, that's kind of weird. I don't know why she's not there in this scenario this time around, but it is what it is, I guess. Now, the goal of this chapter is to get into the center of the city. It is a seize map, as all maps in this game are. Now, here's the thing about that, though. This map is actually designed after a Thracia map. One of my favorites in Thracia, actually, chapter 14. And except it's in reverse. You are fighting from the outside, trying to break your way in. So it's way less cool. But it could still be cool. Like storming a defended capital city is a cool concept for a map. We've seen it done before. It can be done very well. But this time around, it's first of all, the map is enormous, and all the enemies are still pretty strong, especially on hard mode. On normal mode, they're much more forgettable, but it's fine. And there's only two ways to get into the city. I guess three technically, but there is a door in the middle of the city, or like the city gate that kind of bars progress. In order to get through that, though, you need to wait for several turns, just basically doing nothing, because for the most part you're going to take out all the enemies beforehand. So you kind of just have to mindlessly sit around and wait for them to do shit. I think it's like turn 8 or something that opens, turn 6, somewhere around there. The alternative is that you can go to either side of the gate and there are breakable walls, but those have 100 HP, and they are a lot harder to defend. So it's better. I think you're better off just waiting to. Technically, maybe it doesn't feel this way. Technically, it is faster to just wait around, because breaking those walls takes like a couple turns. So depending on your team layout and things like that, you might just be better off waiting for the door to open. Once the door does open, you're going to be greeted by a lot of really dangerous enemies. There are sword masters, there are nomad troopers, there are sages with status staves, there are mages, all sorts of really tough enemies that you have to wade through. You can you can choke the point a little bit, and it's probably fine. Honestly, I'm on normal mode, especially. I think this map is like okay up to that point. I think it's a little boring, but like overall, I kind of I like the concept. Where all semblance of that gets thrown out the window for me is when you actually make it into the city and you have to fight the boss, because the boss is named Kel, and he is a sword master. On normal mode, he is pretty strong. I would say he's definitely one of the strongest bosses we've had to fight so far on normal mode. And he's really tough to hit because he has really high speed, really high luck. He's on a throne. He's fast enough to double basically all of your units. All of your middle of the road units. I didn't have anybody that could double him, except for, actually, I don't even think Shanna could. Shanna was like one speed off of doubling him. So I had to, it was alright. I managed. It wasn't terrible. On hard mode, this is a contender for the worst boss in the entire series. He has 27 skill and speed, which is 3 off of the cap, which combined with the throne bonuses, he's basically going to be unhittable by any normal unit. Even like Rutger with a Killing Edge or Wodao is probably going to struggle a lot against him. He has a light brand, though, which is the only saving grace. If he had like a normal weapon, God, this map would suck so fucking much. It already does, but it would be borderline unwinnable on hard mode, I feel like, depending on if you have any good units or not. But basically, what you have to do is break his light brand. That's essentially what you have to do. In this game, light brands deal exactly 10 damage at range and cannot crit. So you don't have to worry about his high speed or his high strength, because he's going to do exactly 10 damage. It'll most likely be 10 damage times 2, but it is only going to be 10 damage, or 20 damage, I guess. Most characters can have at least 20 HP by this point, so that's not too big of a deal. And then it only has 25 uses, so if you get him to wear it out long enough, then it will break. I just think that that's super boring and sucks, and there's not really a reliable way to beat him at this point. I mean, like a really, really strong anima mage, like even my Lu. I have the best Lu to ever exist, ever, in any cartridge of, or any playthrough of FE6 to ever happen, and even he was like really struggling against this guy on normal mode. On hard mode, it would have been even worse. And then, of course, you have like Milady and Percival and Rutger. All those guys can't do shit to him either. Again, mostly on hard mode. On normal mode, they would have been like fine. The 1v1 wasn't favorable, but I could like switch them out. It would have been okay. I probably would have been fine even if I didn't have to break his light brand. But it just sucks, man. This is just a tedious, boring map, and it's kind of, to add insult onto injury, is a mockery of one of my favorite maps from FE5. I love this map. So, unfortunately, Sacae takes another victim with a dog shit map. the late game of this game just isn't very good. I know I do like this game. I swear it's gonna start to sound between last episode and this episode, it's gonna start to sound like I don't like this game very much, but it's a good game. I am still having fun. It's just Sacae route is really bad, and Ilia route doesn't have a lot of great maps either. So anyway, it is what it is. Once you kill Kel, there's some really good items here. You can get some villages, and you kill Kel, and you capture the throne, and that's the end of the chapter. 12th turn is when the fucking gate opens. And they also jump you with reinforcements from inside the houses. So even if you do manage to break through early, you're just going to get same turn reinforcement jump scared by fucking Myrmidons and die. So the justification for why Nime shows up in this route is that she just feels evil among Burn's troops. So she is investigating. That's all the information that she gives. And then it's just the same thing about Burn resurrecting the Dark Dragon and the Demon Dragon, etc., etc. So yeah, pretty much the same plot beats for this one, just some minor differences. Okay, next up we have Chapter 20, which is called The Silver Wolf. Roy has finally pushed Roritz into a corner. He's broken into the mansion where Roritz is staying, and is going to kill him. Now, they do actually flag up the guidance chapter here. There is a 20x, which you access by... Let me just double check. I'm pretty sure it's just the same as last time. Okay, yeah. To unlock the guidance chapter, complete it within 25 turns, and have Dayan, Sue, and Shin all recruited and alive. So you need 3 this time instead of just 2, which is a little annoying, but it's fine. I don't remember them flagging up a guidance chapter in Ilia route, so I guess that's a little bit of a nice treat this time, is that you kind of get the indication that there's going to be a divine weapon coming up soon, because what Roritz says is, or I guess one of the soldiers talking to Roritz says that the Jute clan is going to come to reinforce them once they have secured the what is it, Mergleis. I don't know how to pronounce it, the Mergleis. So that's your indication that, okay, if you see a bunch of reinforcements show up that look like they're from the Jute clan, you probably missed the guidance chapter. So maybe hurry it up. Kind of like, we saw with Chapter 12 and Chapter 12X. All right, now this is a Fog of War map. As I said, I think I mentioned this earlier, but Sacae gets 2 Fog of War maps instead of just 1. Isn't that lovely? This map is like fine. It's not as bad as the previous one. I would say it's not even as bad as Chapter 18, but like your mileage may vary. There are a lot of really annoying things. There are ballista that you can't hit. The Ilia equivalent of this map did have ballista. I'm pretty sure one of them you couldn't hit, but for the most part, you could either avoid them completely, or you could take out one of them near the start. So it was a little bit easier. And this time they said, nope, absolutely not. There's also some items that you can only get if you warp your thief to steal some shit off of these guys. I think it's like an Orion's Bolt or whatever. Which, by the way, why the fuck do they give you an Orion's Bolt this late in the game? But I suppose, you could sell it or, whatever. If you're still looking around unpromoted Walt, I guess. There are also unreachable status staff sages in the middle of the place. I used Warp to send someone up there to kill them. I think it was like Percival, because they're really annoying. And if you don't get rid of them quickly, then you can it can potentially be very bad. You do get Nime in this chapter, right at the start, who I've already talked about in Ilia route, but just as a recap, she is a druid. She has A staves at base, which is fantastic. She has really high magic, so she is a phenomenal staff bot. She can do combat well, especially on normal mode if you give her like a little bit of help. But for the most part, she's mostly going to be a staff bot, I think, at this point. You're going to have your trained units are probably going to be better. Although honestly, in this game, growth rates are pretty low on average, so maybe not. Maybe she's still better than like a trained Ray, but. Either way, I mean, she's still phenomenally useful for a variety of different reasons. She's definitely... The next few chapters are going to have pretty high deployment limits, and I think they know that, so you're not going to undeploy Nime. You'd have to be, like, kind of crazy to undeploy Nime, because, who are you... There's no way you have, like, 20 units that you want to use in Chapter 21, right? So... But yeah, all things considered, this chapter is pretty basic. There's a treasure room in the top right, And there's really no reason to go the other way other than, like, if you want to split your army, there's absolutely no incentive to do that unless there's, like, an enemy with a stealable item that I don't know about. But otherwise, yeah, it's oh, the guys who reinforce them from the Zhu clan on turn 25, they are mini bosses with their own little names, and they're really strong. Oh my god, they're really strong mini bosses on normal and hard. 21 speed on normal, 26 on hard mode for one of these guys, and another. This guy's a little bit slower. This guy only has 21 speed on hard mode, which is kind of crazy actually, but yeah, I don't know. It's that's neat though that they have their they're not just like generic nomad troopers. Anyway, the only other thing that's worth mentioning about this map is that you get Dayan on turn like 2 or 3, I think, and you can recruit him by talking to him with Roy, Sue, or Shin. And Dayan is a obviously a recruitable nomad trooper, and he is actually pretty good. He, as I mentioned, he's a nomad trooper. He has pretty good bases across the board. His growth rates are terrible, but doesn't matter. He's got decent bases. He's particularly notable because the next chapter, other than the guidance that we're about to do, is chapter 21, which is filled with wyverns. There are wyverns everywhere. So having a bunch of people who can use bows is really nice. And in that alone would make him better than Juno, but then also his stats are just like better in every conceivable way. Yes, I'm just gonna do a side-by-side comparison of Dayan and Juno real quick. Okay, so yes, Dayan is 3 levels higher with 10 more HP, 3 more strength, 2 more skill, 4 more speed, 2 less luck, 2 higher defense, and equal res, and higher con, 2 higher con. So no, the con doesn't matter as much, obviously, because you're going to be like rescuing them with them a lot. But he's definitely not an excellent unit by any means, but he is certainly a very fine, serviceable filler unit. And obviously, one unit is not worth going Sacae over Ilya for, especially on hard mode. I would absolutely recommend you go Ilya route on Sacae on Sacae mode. On hard mode, I think Ilya is the much more preferable option in that context. But on normal mode, you can get away with it, and Dayan is absolutely a little bit more enjoyable to use on than Juno, I would say. So he might be worth picking up if you're into that. And then obviously, if you want the guidance chapter, you need to and you're on Sacae route, you need to recruit him, and he has to survive the chapter at the very least. Yeah, so that's all there is. There's some tough enemies here. Again, sages, swordmasters, nomad troopers, all the good stuff. But you know the drill by this point. You kill them. You go to Roritz. Roritz is pretty tough. He's a strong guy, but you manage to take him out and capture with Roy. One thing I did actually want to mention from the Dayan recruitment conversation, for some reason, they only have the Roy one on here. The other two are not mentioned at all. Sue, for what it's worth, Sue is Dayan's granddaughter. So there's that, and then Shin is just a guy who is in the same clan that I think Dayan sent to go look for Sue. So they have that connection there. I think I recruited him with Shin, and the conversation was pretty whatever. But the Roy conversation, I think, has an interesting point. They don't really do anything with it though. It's again the concept of, well, yes, we're being controlled by Burn, but if Etruria comes in and beats Burn and just takes over, then that's no better. So what's the point? We might as well just fight with Burn. Is kind of the mentality of the Jute clan, certainly, and then also even in Ilya. Some of the people there were thinking that way as well. Dayan does mention that, and he says, "Hey, we want you to, as soon as this battle's over, as soon as you've recaptured Sacae, we need you to leave immediately." And Roy basically says, "No, we can't do that. We need to use this as a base of operations to launch an attack on Burn." And he makes his case that even if he could get rid of Burn from Sacae, as long as Burn is still around and still like aggressing towards the other nations, it's it's only a matter of time before they come back. So that's kind of Roy's mentality, and he gets Dayan to agree with him, and that's basically it. They kind of hand wave it away. I don't know why they would bring it up if they were just going to be like resolve it one conversation, but he does promise Dayan to leave as soon as Burn is defeated. Okay, yes. So for real this time, that is the end of the chapter, and it's all just more Guinevere stuff, giving the Zephiel backstory. But that's all. Okay. Last but certainly least, we have chapter 20X, which is called The Bow of the Winds. There's another opportunity to get a divine weapon. This time it is Merglis, the Bow of Wind. All of them kind of have different elemental associations, as we know. And this is the Bow of the Winds of the Sacaean tribes. I think Lane uses this in a few of her alts and heroes, I'm pretty sure, but she doesn't use it in FE7, though, which would have been really cool, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Anyway, so the whole gimmick here is really stupid. So the start of the chapter, Roy and Shin are talking about, a little bit of the lore around the divine weapon, as they do at the beginning of all the Gaiden chapters. And Shin mentions that this is the original wielder of Merglis is a woman named Hannon. And Roy mentions that, just as a fun little tidbit, that she and Saint Elamine were the only two women among the 8 heroes, which I think is a fun little detail. It doesn't, according to the Serenus Forest script, they don't make any indication of what the gimmick of this map is. So I don't know. I don't remember if they said it in my version and or if they skipped over it and I just knew because I have played this game before. But that's kind of a dick move, man. They just say fuck you, and then let you figure it out on your own. But essentially, there are, here, let me count real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different seize points. And every time you restart the map, the actual correct seize point is shuffled at random. And you need to find the correct one and seize it. If you seize the incorrect one, then you will get jumped by 6 reinforcements. Thankfully, at least on normal mode, the reinforcements are pretty weak, so they're pretty easy to deal with if you're just prepped beforehand. But and they're not same turn reinforcements. They come out right away, so you can pretty much they jump out and say, "Oh, they sprung the trap! Get them, boys!" And you can just jump. You can jump them right back and kill them before they even have a chance to move. So good old fashioned reinforcements, the way that I'm used to them working in Fire Emblem. Now, there are a couple different ways to play this map. On hard mode, kind of the preferred strategy, because this map is so annoying with how strong the enemies are. The method that a lot of people choose to employ is just hard resetting the map and getting Roy, like brute forcing it so that you can get Roy to the first seize point and then capture it, and then if it's wrong, just reset the map and do it all over again until eventually it shuffles into the correct one. I did not do it that way. The map is easy enough on normal mode where you can play it straight. It's not too bad. It's just, it's just kind of a dick move. This whole route is characterized by like, is this map that bad on normal mode? No, it's alright. The gimmick's a little dumb, but it's fine. It's not that bad. But I do have to compare that with hard mode, where it's like one of the worst maps in the entire series. It's like, how do I strike that balance? Like I had an alright time with it. It wasn't that bad for me, but would I call it a good map? No, absolutely not. So I don't know. It's worth thinking about. I think that this game has a lot of maps like that. Like Chapter 7, I think, is a great example. Like, Chapter 7 is one of my favorite maps in the entire game. But is it on normal mode, where it's, like, still fairly challenging, but it's not too bad? On hard mode, it's, like, balls to the wall difficult. Anyway, I just played this map straight, and I got it on, I think it was the 3rd or 4th one that I captured was the correct one. I think it could have been interesting. I don't know if I would say good, but at least you could like plan around it if it was always the last one that you captured. That could be kind of cool. Kind of like they did in Chapter 16 of Conquest, where Shura is always going to be the last guy you talk to. I thought that map was really fun. It had a cool gimmick that you could like plan around always knowing when you're gonna find Shura. As a side note, this is the map that they chose to associate with Lynn in Effie Engage for some reason. They couldn't find any FE7 ones that fit her better, I guess, despite there being like a couple of Lynn mode maps that they could have used, even a couple of like late game FE7 maps that they could have used. I don't know, but they chose this one, I guess, because of Merglease, I suppose. Anyway, that's pretty much all there is to say about this map. The bosses are pretty tough. The enemies are pretty tough. The gimmick is stupid, and if you're playing on hard mode, is like extremely punishing. But it's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. We find Merglease after Roy captures the correct one, and they do the same bit as in the Iliad Gaiden map where Merlinus is like, "We have to go and murder the fleeing soldiers," and Roy's like, "No, no, 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 absolutely not." And then we get more context on if we don't. I'm wondering if you don't get the Gaiden chapter, did you just not get the full Zephiel backstory? Because this is the script for 20X, and it's Guinevere giving Roy the full story. That's kind of shitty. if Zephiel's backstory, like this much of it, is locked behind the fucking Gaiden chapter. I don't know. There's a lot I could say about the Gaiden chapters being in this game. And how they're designed and things like that. But I'll save that for like the final thoughts segment, I think. That seems to make the most sense to me. Okay, and yeah, that's all for Ilia. Or that's all for Sacae, rather. Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to our map gauntlet. This time around, I mean, it's really, I could do this in reverse, really. I could talk about like what my least favorite map is. That would be the hardest question is which of these maps sucks the most. For my money, I'm gonna do it through the lens of normal mode as best as I can. I didn't play hard mode, so it wouldn't really make sense for me to judge it any other way. So I'm gonna do it based on normal mode. And on normal mode, I would say that the worst one was probably chapter 18 or 19. I would say 18 is just annoying because of all the reinforcements jumping you. But 19 was a little bit annoying just because you had to wait around for so long. I would say chapter 18 was my least favorite out of these. So take that as you will. As for my favorite, I think it's probably 17 just because 17 is so like inoffensive. It's like it is absolutely a chapter in Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade. But otherwise, there's not really much else to say about it. It's fine. Mediocre on the mid side, and it's absolutely not beating chapter 11A, which I think is, I mean, again, I'm pretty sure that's just going to be my favorite for the rest of the game, but we'll have to see. There are still chapter 21 and 22 are both pretty cool fun maps that I like, so we'll have to see. Okay, so the only news that I see worth talking about is actually something that I found out about the other day, just a few days ago, which is the FE7 and FE6 are coming to the Nintendo Switch Online, subscription system. Obviously, FE6, unfortunately, is Japan only still. They're not releasing an official localization of FE6. Sad, but it is what it is. FE7 though is going to be available for everybody to play on Game Boy Advance. You do need the expansion pass, which I'm just going to be fully transparent, is the biggest waste of money I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. It's just not worth it, guys. I'm sorry. if you have the system, if you're doing like a family plan or something, then perhaps. But it's just so, the online's terrible, first of all, but also it's just not the game. The games aren't worth it, man. It's just so expensive. The emulation for the N64 in particular is just really bad. Just pirate the damn games, or even just get them on physical on card if you want. Like it's I don't, how much are the GBA Fire Emblem games going for these days? Let me take a look. Okay, so it looks like this is the Japanese version though. I don't think the GBA is region locked, but these all look like super reproduction cards. Sacred Stones is only $30. It seems like that might be a reproduction though. I don't know. You see, all these are like complete in box. I don't want that. I don't want the $80 complete in box. I'm just looking for cartridge only. High quality reproduction is only $20. That's interesting. All right, well, pirate them, I guess. I don't know what to say, but yeah, it's not worth it. I wouldn't bother. But anyway, that's all that I had for news. I just recently beat. I've only beaten one game since the last main episode, I think, and it was The Walking Dead. I am a big Telltale fan, and I decided to play Walking Dead. It's been on my list for a while, and I gave it a shot, and it was a lot of fun. I really liked it. As I said, I'm a big Telltale fan. I really love Wolf Among Us. I really love the Batman Telltale games, but Walking Dead was also very good. It was a little rough around the edges in the gameplay department. I think the quick time events were a little wonky. The menu navigation the dialogue choice navigation was done with the arrow keys and the enter button rather than with just being able to move your mouse and click on stuff, which I thought was weird, but it is what it is. It's a good story. I'm not much of a Walking Dead stan particularly. I haven't read the comics or seen the show, so I don't really know much about that world. But I thought that it was a great little story set in that universe. I think Lee is a fantastic protagonist. Clem is a fantastic. I guess she would also be considered a protagonist, but she rides that line really well of being a kid character who is endearing, which already is pretty hard. But the obviously it's fairly easy to make a kid character be like, oh, you want to protect the child, because I think it's in most people's instincts to want children to be safe. But what they also do really well is they actually make her useful, and the couple of ways that she lashes out and does the wrong thing are all pretty reasonable. Like going on ahead without you, trying in an effort to be useful. Things like that. I never felt particularly frustrated with Clementine at any point during the game. So I don't know. It's a fun game. If you're a Telltale fan, I would definitely recommend checking it out. If not, it's fine. The Telltale model of games is pretty hit or miss, I think, for a lot of people, because the choices matter in some ways, and there are some long-term impact of your choices, but these aren't I think the game is kind of partially at fault here, because the game, all Telltale games really set themselves up as being oh, these are huge branching choices that are going to tailor the rest of your experience in the game, when really it's usually not any. You might a character might be around for an extra chapter, whereas they if you don't make the right choices, maybe they die a little earlier, but for the most part it's gonna be basically a lot of the same experience. So playing through the game multiple times and seeing the outcomes of different choices might be a little bit disappointing. I personally have never tried. Actually, that's not true. I think I've played Wolf Among Us twice, and I plan to play it a third time, because I want to transfer my save file to that. I played it on mobile, and I want to play it on PC so that I can transfer my save to Wolf Among Us 2 when that eventually comes out. Maybe at this point I'm not sure. We'll have to see. Anyway, yeah, that's all there is to it. There is another game that I played, actually. It's called Analog: A Hate Story, which I wouldn't recommend personally. It's a very interesting game in some ways. It's a story about you're way in the distant future. You have found a derelict spaceship where everybody has died, and you're just trying to piece together what happened, but not in a cool Obra Dinn kind of way. In you read a bunch of emails from people, and try to piece it together that way. And there's some AIs that you can talk to. It's all right. It's definitely not a particularly great game. There's some ways in which it's really weird and creepy. So if you're turned off by problematic, it's very problematic in a lot of ways. So I wouldn't recommend playing it if that's not really your cup of tea. But it's fine. It's certainly interesting. If you're ever interested, I have reviewed some of the games I've played on Backlogged. Not many. But my backlogged name is just I'm a Melee Kirby. So if you're ever interested in any of the games I talk about and you want to hear my thoughts on them, by all means check out my backlogged. I have a few reviews on very miscellaneous things. I don't know why. Hold on, let me see. I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 reviews, and there's really no rhyme or reason to the ones I have played, and that I have reviewed. Maybe don't read. Okay, never mind. I'm saving a reveal for what my favorite Fire Emblem game is, for when we eventually get there, and I do mention that in one of the reviews. So I guess if you want to spoil that for yourself, you can go check it out. But otherwise, I would not. I would not do that. Anyway, doesn't matter. I've been rambling on for at least 10 minutes at this point. It feels like so. Yeah, that's all that I had to say. So have a great rest of your day, everybody, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.